listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast by Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb, Dr. Frederick J. Long, Dr. Mario Melendez, Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and J. M. Smith. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Constituent Marking with Fred Long on Proof Text. I'm Fred Long, and I'm sitting here, and it is actually Thanksgiving Day. Yeah, and I'm sitting outside at the farm. You may hear some animal sounds, I don't know. But we're looking at verse 28, and this is a long verse. And it continues from the previous verse, obviously, but grammatically we're going to see that it's connected. So the ke is marking. Verse 28 begins with a ke, and I put a box around it, and it's connecting to the previous verse. And then we see an us, which has a rough breathing mark and an accent, and so this is a relative pronoun, and so it's accusative plural, and it's a direct object. I see a men, and then I see the verb and the subject, and then I see a prepositional phrase. So you have ke us, ke receives a box, us receives a double underlined, and starts a subordinate clause. So this starts a subordinate clause, and then we see a men, and this men is a connector, and it anticipates something that's coming forward. So sometimes there's a men de construction, but as I look through here, there's no de. So I'm looking for, when I see a men, I start looking for a de, and even in the next verse, which I can pull up here, there's no de. So that's not what's going on here. It's not a men as in starting a men de construction. Rather, it's anticipating a list that's coming up here. It's forward pointing, and we're going to see that list, that this, it may be working kind of with the us to kind of help indicate that this us is going to be receiving particularization in what follows. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight these things that follow as particularizations of the us. It means which ones. So, and which, indeed, I might translate the indeed, God established in the church, and indeed, which God established in the church. So the which needs a referent, and it goes back to the mele. So here you can see the mele of the previous verse. So he says, you are the body of Christ and are members from a part of it. And even which indeed God established in the church. So all of this is a subordinate clause with us. So I'm going to close off this subordinate clause, the us part, way at the end here, because this is one big subordinate clause. And so in the church, it's a prepositional phrase. So you have ke us men, etheto o theos, en te ecclesia. And then we're going to get, apposition. So I put an equal sign here. Now this equal sign is going to start to show more about the us, which God established in the church. So members which God established in the church. So the equal sign is indicating that you have apposition, and I'm going to go ahead and move that equal sign really over to the apostles right there. That's the start of the equal sign. But what is going on with proton? And then you have a devteron. Then we see a triton. So you have a list that's going on here. Eventually this list has epita. ipita, and that occurs twice. And then eventually you have no adverb or sequencing indicated in what follows. So this list starts with proton, then devteron second, then triton third, and then you have ipita, that means next, and then you have nothing. You have no adverb or sequence anymore. Okay, so let me read this out here. Proton apostolos, devteron prophetas, triton didaskolous, ipita dunamis, ipita charismata iamaton, antilepsis, kubernesis, yene glosson. All right, we have a sequence, we have a list that is prioritized. First, second, third, next, then nothing. So we have a listing of how many items. Let's count them. You have apostles, prophets, teachers. So didaskolous, teachers, dunamis, which really means powers. And sometimes the word powers, dunamis, is translated as miracles. So like powers as instantiated in miracles. You have charismata iamaton, which are gifts of healings. So they're distinguished from powers or miracles. You can have miracles that are different than healings. Then you have antilepsis, which is interesting. This is a hapax legamenon, which means once spoken. It's a word that's spoken only once in the New Testament. It means, it's often translating as like helping, but we're going to look at that in just a moment here. Actually, here's the LSJ lexicon. LSJ stands for Liddell Scott Jones. This is the classical lexicon, the major classical lexicon, LSJ. And we can see that this word has a lot of different kinds of meanings. I mean, receiving in turn or exchange, laying hold of, turn, reciprocation, holding, supporting, defense, succor, claim, objection, grasping with the mind, apprehension, seizure or attack of disease. So there's a lot of extended meanings. So basically this word anti has to do with exchange or we often think of it as against, but it really does mean like in like a substitute or doing something in place of. And then you have the lepsis, which so anti-leps or lempsis, the mu is optional, comes from lambano, so to take or receive, and then in the place of. Well, this can mean so many different things in particular extended settings. So in the New Testament, it comes into our idiom as helps. But I would sure like to look at this word. This is a very curious word. I wonder what relevance it has for the Corinthians. And so, yeah, I just draw this to your attention. Interesting word here. Now, there's another interesting word that only occurs once in what follows, the kubernesis. These are all plural, by the way, and accusative. These are from a vowel stem, third declension nouns. So kubernesis is often translated as administration, but it's also a hapax legamenon, like administrations. It's in the plural. So here I'm showing those you can see in the classical lexicon what this word means. It's actually steering or piloting. It can be used metaphorically of government, of like cities. So interesting word. It comes from the Greek word for sailing, like steering a ship, acting as a helmsman, driving, and it can also be used metaphorically, this verb. Now, this verb does not occur in the New Testament, but it comes into the New Testament by way of this noun. So does this have any relevance for the Corinthians? Well, yeah, they're a port city. Cenchreae is not too far away. So very interesting that Paul is using these words that have limited use in the New Testament, really only here. And I'd want to do a little bit more reflection on that, what kind of relevance this might have for them. And last but not least in the list of how many different things, I lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last but not least in this list is yene glosson, kinds of languages or tongues. And of course, that's the big question mark. What does tongues or languages mean? And why is it last in the list? I think it's strategic because, in fact, we've seen that this list is ordinal. It's counting them down and then sequencing. And so this occurs last. And we'll talk about that more in a later episode. Well, thanks for listening, watching Constituent Marking with Fred Long.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.